Did you know that you don't actually have to leave North America to walk into a fully intact ancient Egyptian temple? That's because an entire ancient Egyptian temple, known as the Temple of Dendur, is sitting in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So today, we're going to be looking at what it is and the story of how it wound up an ocean away from Egypt, including the presidents who were intimately involved with it. Ultimately, it's all because of the Nile. From 1960 to 1970, Egypt under Gamal Abdel Nasser built a huge dam spanning the Nile just south of Aswan. Its purpose was to control the Nile flood and to create hydroelectric energy to boost Egypt's industries, but its construction would result in a whole region between the first and second Nile cataracts, known as Lower Nubia, being forever submerged under a huge lake now known as Lake Nasser. Lower Nubia was filled with magnificent monuments from across antiquity, built by pharaohs, the kings of Kush, and even Roman emperors. The most famous of these have to be the awe-inspiring temples of Abu Simbel, built by Ramses II, but they would all be permanently lost underneath Lake Nasser unless extraordinary action was taken to relocate them. UNESCO launched the International Campaign to save the monuments of Nubia in order to prevent this, and 51 different countries joined forces to move 22 different temples, including the Temple of Dendur, out of harm's way. They also tried the best they could to excavate and document everything they couldn't move, like the enormous ancient fortress of Buchen. It's also worth remembering that along with these ancient wonders, 70,000 people were also forced to relocate and abandon their homes because of this dam. In order to get these countries to contribute to the campaign, Egypt promised to give them half of the artifacts they discovered during their excavations, and even entire Nubian temples. Eventually, Nasser, the guy, not the lake, decided to gift 5 temples to the 5 countries that had contributed the most: the US, Spain, the Netherlands, Italy, and West Germany, which was only given a portion of a temple instead of the whole thing. The Temple of Dendur was given to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The Temple of Deified was given to the city of Madrid. The Temple of Tafe was given to the Rijksmuseum van Utrecht in Leiden. The rock-cut Temple of Elysia was given to the Museo Egizio in Turin, and a gate from the Temple of Kalabsha was given to the Egyptisches Museum in Berlin. They're all incredibly fascinating, and I was originally going to cover them all, so if you want me to make a video on them, just comment down below. The most famous of the 5, and one of the largest, has to be the Temple of Dendur, though. It originally lay around 50 miles or 80 kilometers south of Aswan, built into a sloping, rocky hillside overlooking the west bank of the Nile. As with any other ancient Egyptian temple, its walls are adorned with images of the pharaoh who built it offering to the gods. But this isn't just any other pharaoh, it's the first Roman emperor, Augustus, as indicated by the cartouches around him reading Autokratos Kaisaros, or just the term pharaoh. The Temple of Dendur, originally known as Tutsis, was one of 17 building projects he launched all across Lower Nubia, soon after conquering Egypt from Cleopatra in 30 BC. He also centralized the administration of Egypt's temples and confiscated their property, so building all these temples was sort of his way of making it up to the local priests. By honoring local cults and depicting himself in the guise of a pharaoh, he also legitimized his rule over Egypt. The temple was built to honor Egypt's most popular god at the time, Isis, as well as 2 deified humans, the brothers Pedesi and Pihor. They were sons of a local ruler named Cooper, and they're thought to have drowned in the Nile, a fate which had given them divine status. Cooper and his sons had likely aided the Romans in the war they fought against the Kushites between 25 and 21 BC, and the temple was probably built the following decade. Many other gods are also shown throughout the temple, including local Nubian ones like Mandulus and Arsanuphis. So let's look at what the temple actually looks like. It begins with a large cult terrace, a feature of many Nubian temples of the time. This was probably where the sacred cult statues held within the temple, which were thought to be inhabited by its gods, were paraded around in portable shrines during festivals, so the public could get a bit closer to them than usual. Following that is a large gate, once part of a massive wall or pylon based on its rough outer sides. After that comes the main building, the temple house, starting with an entrance hall with a porch featuring 2 columns. This design is called a distil in antis, and was common throughout the preceding Ptolemaic period. This is followed by an undecorated offering hall and ends in a sanctuary partially cut from the rock, where the cult statue was actually kept. Right now, the Met has the lower half of a statue of an early Ptolemaic priestess named Tagerem in place of the original statue, assumedly long gone. The only decoration in the sanctuary is a stela set into the center of the back wall, topped by a frieze of cobras and depicting Pihor worshipping Isis and Pedesi just below worshipping Osiris, although Pedesi's section is badly damaged. This is the only place in the temple where Augustus isn't the one making offerings. Originally, there was actually a small rock-cut chamber behind the temple itself that assumedly acted as Pedesi and Pihor's tomb, but it was left in its original location in Egypt and is now flooded underneath Lake Nasser. Even more mysteriously, the thick rear wall of the temple behind the sanctuary features a little secret chamber closed by a deliberately removable block. This might be where a priest once hid to provide oracles to people in the sanctuary through a hole in the wall. It may have also acted as the tomb of the two brothers, or it might have just been used to store ritual equipment. Who knows? But like any ancient Egyptian temple, this isn't just a building, it's a microcosm of the natural world. The base is lined with carvings of papyrus and lotus flowers sprouting from water, symbolized by the Nile god Hapi. The two columns on the porch are meant to look like papyrus plants bound with lilies, and the winged sun disk, representing the sky, sits above both the gate and the porch of the entrance hall, which also happens to feature a ceiling decorated with vultures. Eventually, Egypt's ancient pagan religion faded away and Christianity took its place. In the Temple of Dendur's case, this literally happened, since it was converted into a church sometime during the second half of the 6th century, based on a Coptic inscription found on the left jamb of the entrance porch. The inscription also records that this was done by a priest named Abraham on the orders of Erpanom, the king of the Nubian kingdom of Nobatia, and Theodore, bishop of Philae, previously a bastion of paganism. It's one of the earliest Christian documents in the whole of Nubia, but even its role as a church eventually came to an end and it became a ruin. The temple has been visited by numerous explorers since the early 18th century, and they all made sure to leave lots of graffiti recording their visits. In the early 20th century, the first iterations of the Aswan Dam that preceded the Aswan High Dam would totally submerge the temple for parts of the year, and as a result, the vibrant colors of its reliefs were forever lost. In the 1960s, it was at risk of being submerged forever, so in 1962 it was dismantled into 642 different blocks, weighing a total of 800 tons, and taken away from its original location. In 1965, Nasser gifted it to the United States in order to reward it for its $10 million contribution to the UNESCO Campaign, which JFK had convinced Congress to push through at Jackie Kennedy's insistence. Originally, it was actually supposed to go to Belgium, but Egypt disapproved of its colony in the Congo, so it handed Dendur to the US instead. Lyndon B. Johnson personally awarded the temple to the Metropolitan Museum 2 years later in April of 1967, after a committee had reviewed numerous offers made by institutions and cities across the country. The Smithsonian Institute was the Met's biggest rival and wanted to install the temple outdoors in the middle of Washington, D.C., and they had Jackie Kennedy's full support. She wanted to make it into a memorial to her late husband, and in an angry phone call with Thomas Hoving, the Met's director at the time, she claimed that she'd rather see it crumble into dust than not in D.C. There were plenty of other stranger offers too, including one from a real estate developer in Florida and South Illinois University, which wanted to put it in a massive geodesic dome, because there happens to be a town in southern Illinois called Cairo. Oh, and of course Memphis, Tennessee wanted it too, and I sort of wish they got it, because it would have been the perfect complement to their Bass Pro Shop pyramid. Hoving and the Met's curator of Egyptian art, Henry Fisher, delivered a great pitch to the committee. They argued that if the temple was exposed to the elements in D.C., it would collapse within 25 years. And they also promised to house the temple within a special new wing of the museum to resolve that. Now called the Sackler Wing, it features a reflecting pool mimicking the Nile and a glass wall looking out onto Central Park. The temple was still in Egypt, so in 1968, Fisher had to go there to manage its blocks being packed onto the freighter SS Concordia Star, along with things like canned tomatoes and wheels of cheese. On August 10th, 1968, the crates containing the blocks had arrived. It was up to the museum to put together the biggest Lego set of all time. And between 1974 and 75, Italian stonemasons rebuilt it, where it still stands today, using the ancient incisions on the blocks and old photos. It was finally opened on September 27th, 1978, and has been one of the museum's main attractions ever since. But the Temple of Dendur isn't actually the only complete ancient Egyptian structure in North America. In fact, the Met alone actually has a whopping 5 of them. In addition to the Temple of Dendur, it has 2 reconstructed tombs from the 5th dynasty, the mastaba of a 5th dynasty official named Perneb from Giza, and the funerary chapel of a prince named Ramkai from Saqqara. It also features the decorated burial chamber of an official named Sobukmos, who worked under the 18th dynasty pharaoh Amenhotep III, which is from the little-known Upper Egyptian site of El Rizikat. And finally, in addition to all that, it has the chapel dedicated to Ramses I, founder of the 19th dynasty, which his son Seti I built for him at Abydos. And of course, there are tons of fragments from numerous other buildings too. The Brooklyn Museum, a stone's throw away, basically has the entire tomb of the early 26th dynasty vizier Nesbeka Shuti, the Boston Egyptian Museum of Fine Arts has all that's left from a massive temple gateway built by Ptolemy VIII at Coptos, and the Penn Museum has much of the palace of Merneptah, the successor of Ramses the Great, which he built at Memphis. The Field Museum in Chicago has 2 chambers from the mastaba of the 5th dynasty prince Unisank from Saqqara, and another chapel from Saqqara in storage. And of course, there are way more of these all over Europe. Some Egyptians have voiced their disapproval of Nasser's decision to give the 4 Nubian temples away, but it doesn't look like any of these are going back to the land of the Nile anytime soon. So what do you guys think of all this? Leave your comments below and make sure to like and subscribe if you want more videos just like this.